Welcome to meeting number 105 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize to all members the following preventive measures. To prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, all in-person participants are reminded to keep their earpieces away from their microphones at all times. As indicated in the communique from the Speaker to all members on Monday, April 29th, the following measures have been taken to prevent audio feedback incidents. All the earpieces have been replaced by a model which greatly reduces the probability of audio feedback. The new earpieces are black in color, whereas the former earpieces were gray. Please only use a black approved earpiece. By default, all unused earpieces will be unplugged at the start of a meeting. When you're not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table as indicated. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. These measures are in place so that we can conduct our business without interruption and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including, in particular, the interpreters. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. I'd like to make a few comments. I'd like to, please do bear in mind that I have to recognize you before you speak. Now, pursuant to Standing Order 1064, the committee will commence consideration of the request by members of the committee to consider a request to undertake a study of waivers granting the use of Russian titanium in Canadian aerospace manufacturing. Yes, Madam McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have to say the reason that I was one of the members that signed this 1064 is because it is very concerning that we have heard that once again the government has undermined the sanctions against Russia, undermined our sanction regime by allowing another waiver. This isn't the first time that this has happened. Of course, we saw the waiving of the sanctions for the turbines, I think it was 2 years ago. At that point, we had called an emergency meeting of this committee so that we could discuss the matter and we could understand the government's decision in softening our sanctions in a way that I know is very disappointing to our Ukrainian allies, that is very disappointing to other people in the around the world that are hoping that Canada will continue to stand in support of Ukraine. I know we have heard that this is particularly egregious because Ukraine has titanium that they could use, and instead we have waived the sanction on Russian titanium. So I think it is very important that we understand why the government made this decision. You know, the government has said that they are steadfast in their support of Ukraine. This does make one question whether that is accurate or not. I have circulated what I suggest that the committee should undertake, and it is that pursuant to the 1064 request for an emergency meeting made by members of this committee on April 26, 2024, in response to the government's decision to grant sanction waivers to 2 aerospace companies to allow them to use Russian titanium in their manufacturing, and given that this is not the first time that the government has weakened and undermined Canada's sanction regime against Russia by waiving sanctions, the committee study the matter and hold at least 2 meetings on the issue and invite the Minister of Foreign Affairs to testify. Thank you.
Mr. Oliphant.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Liberals are often accused of taking simple issues and making them complex. And at the risk of that accusation, I want to spend a little bit of time on talking about this motion because it is worded in a very simple or almost simplistic way for a very complex issue with respect to assertions being made that may or may not actually be true. Let me start out by saying we are in favor of an opportunity to discuss this waiver at this committee. We think the committee has not only the right but responsibility to understand this in an important way. So we are not opposed to doing this because we actually think that our sanctions regime should be extremely targeted and focused on the enemies in any situation or the wrongdoers in any situation. Right now, with respect to Russia's illegal invasion into Ukraine, we have, in Canada alone, an unprecedented number of sanctions that we have heard about in this committee. Whereas we used to have dozens to hundreds, we now have thousands of sanctions in place against Russia, Russian oligarchs, and others who do business in and with Russia. And it is an important regime, and we do it with our friends, we do it with our allies, and we do it in concert with others. At times, as we have understood since the 1980s with sanctions, we can have problems raised, and we have the wrong people paying costs or price for the sanctions that we are imposing, and that's why waivers are in place. That's why there is a structure within our sanction system that waivers can be made when a case is made that says a sanction, a particular sanction, is actually hurting the wrong people at the wrong time and is not effective and is actually counterproductive in our ongoing, always committed response to Ukraine and the egregious assault that they are facing every day by Russia. So there is a system in place for waivers, and I don't blame any member of the committee for not knowing how those things work, because part of that is really strictly controlled due to commercial interests and confidentiality, because what is in a supply chain for any particular, especially high-tech or high-value manufacturing, is confidential proprietary information that we want to make sure we protect, because those are Canadians, Canadian businesses, Canadian jobs at risk. But there is a system in place, and I think it would be very good for this committee to hear, to the ability that can be explained, what the companies saw the problem was. And let's be clear, we're talking about two aerospace companies. We're talking about Bombardier, we're talking about Airbus. We are talking about two companies with thousands of employees in Canada who have a particular, very highly sensitive, important safety and commercial interest at stake, and they have requested, and we have read in the media, reports of a waiver on one part of one sanction to allow them to do their work. Again, I will say we'll support this, but I'm going to suggest some amendments, and part of that is because we are not talking about something that we're not buying a box of titanium. What it is two aerospace companies in Canada are attempting to bring in parts that they fear or they know or they understand may have titanium in them that has come from Russia. They're doing their due diligence. These are good corporate citizens trying to make sure that they do not break a Canadian law that this Parliament has passed and that the government has put in place at this time through the sanctions regime. So we have a situation where Canadians have the right to know, and it's important within the bounds of commercial confidence that why this decision was made. So, but there are a few problems I have with the kind of value statement that is embedded in here, and I would simply like to have this a simpler motion that doesn't necessarily make a political speech, that is actually able to get to the heart of the matter. So I'm going to actually suggest 3 amendments to the motion as it stands right now. The first one is with respect to the use of the word Russian titanium. That is in the 3rd line in the English version of the Russian titanium. And I would like to replace with the words the use of Russian titanium with the use of components potentially containing Russian titanium. I'll just repeat that. It's the first amendment. Now, instead of the use of Russian titanium, replace those 4 words with the use of components potentially containing Russian titanium. And I think that's important because we don't know. the full facts on this, and this committee should hear the full facts. But I don't want to make a statement and a motion about something that may or may not be true, because we'd actually get the wrong evidence. Because if someone came to talk to us about the use of Russian titanium, they could simply say, that's not what we do. But we want to be very clear that we want to talk about the use of components potentially containing Russian titanium. That is the first amendment. I'm going to give all three amendments at this time, and you can decide whether you want to vote on them at once or separately. The second replacement would be, and we just feel we would like to support this motion, but obviously we differ with respect to the value statement that says, and given that this is not the first time that the government has weakened and undermined Canada's sanction regime against Russia by waiving sanctions. That's an opinion, but we don't necessarily think it belongs in a motion. I'd like to replace those words with, in light of media reports that aerospace companies employing thousands of Canadian workers received permits to ensure their supply received waivers to ensure their supply chain is compliant with Canadian sanctions regulations. Just double checking with my team. I think that is correct. Yes. So replacing the words, and given that this is not the first time that the government has weakened and undermined Canada's sanction regime against Russia by waiving sanctions, to replace that with, in light of media reports that aerospace companies employing thousands of Canadian workers received waivers to ensure their supply chain is compliant with Canadian sanctions regulations. So this is a justification of why we would like to do the study. The third amendment is, instead of at least 2 meetings, to hold 1 meeting. To hold 1 meeting on this issue. That's the third amendment. And the fourth amendment is with respect to witnesses, and it would read to invite Airbus, Bombardier, relevant ministers and government officials and other witnesses as appropriate. So invite Airbus, Bombardier, relevant ministers and government officials and other witnesses as appropriate. So I will speak to those amendments just for 1 minute and then yield the floor. To summarize, I would be asking to replace the use Russian titanium with components. Sorry, I got too many pages here. The use of components potentially containing Russian titanium. First one. The second one, the lengthy statement about weakening and undermining Canada's sanction regime, with the statement about, in light of media reports that aerospace companies employing thousands of Canadian workers received waivers to ensure their supply chain is compliant with Canadian sanctions regulations. The third one, to hold 1 meeting on the issue, and to replace the Minister of Foreign Affairs to testify with somebody else, including, though, and invite Airbus, Bombardier, relevant ministers and government officials and other witnesses as appropriate. So those would be for the 4 amendments we'd like to make, and that would enable us to wholeheartedly support this motion and ensure that Canadians get to hear why this waiver was indeed granted.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Chong.
Yeah, point of order, Mr. Chair. Perhaps we could deal with these one at a time so that we can more efficiently knock this off. Thank you.
I am fine with that. I just wanted to make sure everyone kind of got the geography of what I was doing out, but I thought you would probably want to take them separately.
So we'll be dealing with them individually as requested by Mr. Chong. I'm sorry?
Another point of order, if possible.
Yes.
Yeah. Will Mr. Alphen willing to share these in writing with us, or by email, or a hard copy, so we can have it in front of us?
I'm not quite able to do that because I was doing it kind of on the fly from many notes. But I'm hoping the analysts, I can repeat them at any time, and I suspect the
Why
analysts,
don't we repeat them when we are
when we're doing them
discussing
one
each
at a
of
time, we'll get them
individually?
repeated to make sure that we have them right.
Mr. Bergeron.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I agree with the spirit of the motion brought forward by our colleague from the NDP, but I don't agree with Mr. Oliphant's statement that the idea that the other waivers might have been provided are an opinion. And I think this is another bad habit on the part of the government to be hiding behind assertions like this. Le Devoir provided a list in one of its articles of exemptions that had been granted by the Government of Canada. And I remember that the whole turbines issue, and the government just continued to provide exemptions without consulting anyone. The Devoir reported on this, and we'd all kind of been duped because the government continued to do this behind closed doors. So it's not an opinion. And therefore, I will vote against Mr. Oliphant's amendment. And what really irritates me, or rather what irritates me in the motion, the original motion, and Mr. Oliphant's motion, is that both of them focus on one kind of exemption. And Le Devoir actually showed that there had been several exemptions. So this is actually very unhealthy for this sector and for the industry, and that found themselves in this situation. Mr. Oliphant took the time to tell us that there were thousands of sanctions, actually. And when we looked at the sanctions regime, the government said, well, we always have to coordinate with our allies in order to be more effective and in order to avoid harming certain industries. But the government did exactly the opposite. Our allies did not apply the same sanctions against titanium. And what that means is that our aeronautics industry was at a disadvantage compared to its European and American counterparts. So the government did its work badly. And because it did that, then it had to bring in exemptions so that our sector wasn't at a disadvantage. They were said, listen, go and get your supply elsewhere. But they weren't supported. And because that didn't work out for them, well, again, they kind of quickly brought in other exemptions. So what is bothering me somewhat in the motions that have been brought forward is the focus on the aerospace industry, because they really don't need this kind of bad publicity in order to undertake its operations and in order to be able to expand. And because of that, if the chairman had acknowledged me before Mr. Oliphant, I would have brought forward a different amendment, which probably would have been simpler than Mr. Oliphant's amendment. And I'm going to share it with you, and then you can decide what you do with that or Mr. Oliphant's, depending on what you think. So what I would do, actually, is between the word...
We'll do, but on a point of order, we have an amendment, actually four, but we can take them severally, on the floor. And we should have our debate now on the amendment as opposed to on adding in another amendment. Deal with these amendments, because if we don't do that, the whole parliamentary procedure falls apart.
Pas d'amendement, je parle.
Well, I just want to say something that might be relevant, potentially. So what I would do is add sanctions regime against Russia, and I would take out to 2 aerospace companies to allow them to use Russian titanium in their manufacturing. And given that this is not the first time that the government has weakened and undermined Canada's sanction regime against Russia by waiving sanctions. So I would take that long sentence out, and I would simply add, so that there's a connection between the beginning and the end, I would add, after waivers, to the sanctions regime against Russia. And so the motion would read that pursuant to the 1064 request for an emergency meeting made by members of the committee on April 26, 2024 in response to the government's decision to grant waivers to the government's sanction regime against Russia, the committee study the issue and hold at least 2 meetings on this issue and invite the Minister of Foreign Affairs to testify. So we'll have an opportunity to speak to Mr. Oliphant's suggestions or proposals, and after that I will move my own amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're on, Mr. Abeltave?
I already said what I need to say.
Okay,
and,
it was a point of order.
We'll see if other members want to say.
So Mr. Chair, I'm confused. What is on the floor in front of the committee right now?
I think what is on the floor are 4 amendments introduced by Mr. Oliphant.
All 4 right now?
No, individually,
Okay,
one
so
by one.
which amendment's on the floor right now?
So the first one,
So I would just say, from procedure point of view, we have 4 amendments have been made, and then take them ad seriatim. So it would be the first one. I suggest it be in order of the text of the report. So, would it be helpful if I read the first one?
yes.
Okay, so the very first one is in the 3rd line of the English version, to allow them, instead of to use Russian titanium, to replace those words with
Of components potentially
the use of
containing.
components potentially containing Russian titanium.
Yes, Mr. Abeltave.
A question of clarification to Mr. Oliphant. If I recall at the beginning, he mentioned the confidentiality on the components and the ingredients, whatever that goes into the manufacturing of product by Airbus and by Bombardier. And then he goes to the potentially contain Russian titanium. That even complicate things further, because there could be other sources of titanium and some components. And if we don't know the tricks of the trade, and if we don't have an idea about the content of the product, how can we determine how accurate this approach is going to be?
I think I understand your point. I mean, and I am, I'll be very clear, I have not been privy to conversations at Global Affairs about this topic. This is not a file. This is a file that is handled elsewhere from me. I have the same information as you have from media reports. And what I understand is that there are components used in the aerospace industry in Canada that come from European manufacturers, and those European manufacturers use titanium, which comes from Russia, but they may source it from elsewhere. And so the waivers are to ensure that a company is not breaking the law if they discover at some point that there's titanium from Russia in those components, which have been made and which will continue. So I think we would need the Aerospace Industry Association or those particular companies to come and explain why this is a problem. We've done that in this committee other places. Are there other sources of those components? And within those components, are they already made? Is there titanium in them? Which is about the safety of aircraft.
I'll take it as a face value, but I do recommend, due to the lack of information and knowledge about this industry in general, and agree on the confidentiality issue, that we should probably keep the motion as is, as wide, as open as is. And then when we bring the industry and the experts here, we will have a chance to at least be able to understand this whole issue properly and deal with it without having to deal with any speculation over what is right and what is wrong and what is accurate and what is not. Because it's going to be very difficult for us to be able to determine what are we voting for if we cannot go that way on your first recommendation.
My fear is that they could easily say, we do not use Russian titanium in our manufacturing. And then we don't get the truth here. They can easily say that. So I'm actually trying to be more helpful. Maybe it's not helpful, but trying to be more helpful to broaden it to say that, if they have components that they are bringing in to do secondary manufacturing with that may contain titanium, that we want to hear about it, not just titanium. Because if we just ask titanium, they're going to say, we don't, it's not Walmart where you go in and buy a box of titanium. This is very complex stuff. It's not my world. I'm not an aerospace engineer. But I understand that it's unlikely that we get titanium here in a box. We get it in a component, and those components are such that there may or may not be titanium in them. And I think we should have the industry association and the companies come and talk about it. That's all. I think I'm being more specific to help us make sure that we don't have someone go around it. Right.
Put it to a vote? Okay, let's put
Just show
that
of hands.
in division.
Just show of hands.
Show of hands? Okay. All those in favor? All those against?
Good.
You are correct. The nays do have it. On division. So next amendment up for debate, Mr. Oliphant.
And this is replacing the value statement that I found we couldn't support, to get it to be a motion that we could support. And so to replace the words, and given that this is not the first time the government has weakened and undermined Canada's sanction regime, which we profoundly disagree with that statement, against Russia by waiving sanctions, we would replace that with the words, in light of media reports that aerospace companies employing thousands
of order,
of
Chair?
Canadian workers.
Yes,
The bells are ringing. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
that's correct. Can we? Yeah, full consent? Okay.
How long are the bells for? How far bells? Okay. Continue for 15 more minutes?
15 or 23? 15? Everyone was good with that? Okay. Yes, the second amendment, Mr.
The
Oliphant.
second one is, in light of media reports that aerospace companies employing thousands of Canadian workers received waivers to ensure their supply chain is compliant with Canadian sanctions regulations.
Any comments? All those in favor? All those in favor? Thank you. All those against? Motion-friendly amendment defeated. On to the third one.
To hold, instead of it told at least 2 meetings, to hold 1 meeting.
All those in favor? Thank you. All those against? Thank you. Defeated. On to the fourth amendment.
Fourth Amendment is with respect to witnesses, because it's only requiring 1 witness, and we don't think that is sufficient
Traduction?
Translation is not working? Can you
I will
proceed?
keep talking to see if it's working. The motion be amended replacing, it's working now? Yeah. Okay. And invite Airbus, Bombardier, relevant ministers, and government officials and other witnesses as appropriate. Invite Airbus, Bombardier, relevant ministers, and government officials and other witnesses as appropriate. By that, I'm talking about the Industry Association, the Aerospace Industry Association particularly. I didn't know the name of it.
Okay. So all those in favor?
Parler?
Yes, yes, Mr. Bergeron?
Oui, Monsieur Bergeron.
Well, as I was saying earlier, and given what I plan on moving in a few minutes, what bothers me here in this amendment is the emphasis being put on the aerospace industry when there were other exceptions, and I'd like us be able to look at those other exemptions granted by the government as well. So if we just limit ourselves to this list of witnesses, then that prevents us from actually inviting other stakeholders in other sectors who also benefited from exemptions on the part of this government. So I would invite my colleagues to vote against this other amendment because this will give the committee greater flexibility in order to determine which witnesses it wants to call.
Madame Chatel.
Merci.
Thank you. I think it's broad enough, actually. But I would like to hear from my colleague what stakeholders he would like to invite forward. I'd refer you to Le Devoir's list on the 3rd of October last. They mention printed circuit boards that would have been sent to Russia from other countries. So it's not just the aerospace industry. There are crustaceans as well. There are all kinds of products that were on the list of exemptions. So I do not want us to limit this to the aerospace industry as well. They're not the only ones who benefited from exemptions on the part of the government. And so if we restrict ourselves to that list of witnesses, then that means this committee cannot invite other witnesses from other areas. So I would like to keep the list as originally proposed by Ms. McPherson, because 2 sessions just with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and...
Ms.
Well, first we have to go to Madame Chatel.
Merci.
Oh, you said point of order?
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Algab.
Yeah, point of order, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Look, I understand what our colleague, Mr. Bergeron, is trying to do, but at the end of the day, once we vote on this motion, if he has other amendments and other witnesses to add, he can certainly table that in his own motion.
Fair enough. Yes, Madame Chatel.
Je pense que
I think adding the words other witnesses as appropriate actually would do that. So I don't think even the amendment brought forward by the Bloc would be necessary. Well, could you reread that? I didn't hear actually other witnesses as appropriate. I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So ready to put it to a vote? All those in favor? Okay, unanimous. Who? Oh, sorry, my apologies, I did not see that. Yes. Mr. Chong.
Yeah, just before we go to the final vote on the motion as amended, I just want to say that, we support Ukraine, and we don't doubt the Liberal government's support for Ukraine, but that doesn't always mean that we always will agree with every decision that the government makes. And so we think it's worthwhile to examine this matter, and so we will support the motion as amended. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chong. Okay, so now we go to the regular, to the motion. So now we go to the motion. So,
No, we're voting on the motion as amended.
so we're going to the motion as amended?
Call the vote.
Yep. All those in favor? Okay. Meeting stands adjourned. Oh, okay.
D'abord, j'ai voté contre.
I voted against first, and second, I wanted to move an amendment, Chair. So I'm going to repeat my amendment that be added after waivers, the words to the sanctions regimes.
J'invoque le
That is not allowed. The motion has passed.
Mr. Bergeron, I've been advised by the clerk that you cannot do so either.
He could make another motion as long as it's been given due notice, but he can't amend this motion now that it is passed.
Correct. Okay, so I guess this meeting stands, yes, Mr. Rapp.
If you seek it, I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following: that the motion that I submitted on notice to the clerk a day ago regarding the Great Lakes Fishery Commission be moved, be allowed for debate, if anyone wished to debate the motion, and then after the debate has collapsed, that the motion be adopted on division.
Fine? Unanimous consent? No? On division? Yeah. Yes, okay. Okay, that's,
Oui, on a changé de sujet, mais avant, j'ai voulu procéder.
Right. Debate it today. I'm not even part of this committee, but come on, guys. What is wrong here?
yes.
If someone would, a point of order, if someone would like a suspension of the meeting, they can ask for a suspension, but we either have to suspend the meeting, and we can take quite a lot of time in that suspension, or we could move on to our work. I'm not asking for a suspension.
Point d'ordre.
Point of order. The discussion I was trying to have with the clerk is very simple. I do not need to give notice for a motion if we are still on the same topic. Now, you did not allow me that right, and immediately afterwards we moved on to another topic. But the fact is that I do not need to give you advance motion, notice rather, for a motion when we're on that same topic. So there was a breach of procedure here, and I am asking that we go back to the previous topic, Chair.
That is what the point of order was. That is what the clerk advised me at the time, Mr. Bergeron. However, I was just informing you of that. You could have actually brought it up, and we could have discussed it at the time.
Le fait est, monsieur.
Chair, the fact is that I needed to consult, and you quickly moved on to another topic. But actually, from the outset, I should not have been deprived of my right to bring forward a motion because we were still on the same topic and there was no need for that advance motion.
I was just simply informing you of what I had been advised, and then you chose not to pursue it any further.
Monsieur le Président, je n'ai pas.
Chair, I did not make that choice. I consulted. That's not the same thing.
That you're not pursuing it anymore at that given juncture, correct?
Non.
No, not at all.
Okay, well, you could have told us that you would like, a couple of minutes to consult. You could have done that, so.
Alors, je demande le consentement unanime.
Well, I'm asking for unanimous consent on the part of my colleagues to come back to that motion.
Sure? No?
No.
I'm afraid there's no unanimous.
Je remercie mes collègues libéraux.
Well, thank you to my Liberal colleagues for their cooperation. I have a long memory.
Motion.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Chong.
Yeah, just I want to speak briefly to the Great Lakes Fishery Commission motion before it's deemed adopted
Sorry,
on division.
that was, sorry, Chair, that was seeking clarification, that was asking for unanimous consent to have that moved?
Yes.
For it to be debated? Is
Yes,
that the
was-
question that's
there
on
was
the
an
floor right
agreement
now?
amongst the, yes.
I don't give unanimous consent, Chair.
Mr. Chair, just on a point of order, I believe if the member consults with her colleagues, she'll understand that there was a discussion amongst members of the committee before the meeting started and that there was an agreement to unanimously consent to that motion.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
So this meeting stands adjourned.
No, I don't think so. I think we still need to, we had unanimous consent to bring the motion. Now we just need to make sure there's no debate, and then you ask if we agree.
Unanimous consent. She's not given unanimous.
Okay.